On today's podcast, we focus on a long journey and what it took to get this team back to the top again in a year where maybe they were not expected to do that. And joining me on the podcast again, a repeat performer here, is the four-time state champion in South Dakota, Pierre Riggs High School, Steele. Coach, it's great to have you back here, and congratulations on another state championship.
Hey, thanks, Keith, for having me on. And this is another fun year, and just thankful to be able to come on and talk with you about it.
And before we got going, you indicated that in some ways this might be one of the most satisfying for you. That it was a year that maybe you weren't expected to be back on the top, but then a year filled with some adversity. Starting with missing some players who were key parts in some of the previous state championships that you had to replace, in a quarterback that you lost, who was the Gatorade Player of the Year, replacing him with a sophomore. And everybody knows that guy's important, but even more important was you had 4 out of your 5 offensive line you were replacing as well.
Yeah, it was definitely, we knew there was going to be some growing pains. We knew it was going to be a process over the course of the season, but our guys just continue to work so hard, and they really do a great job coming together over the course of a season. Our quarterback this year, who was a sophomore, he was with us last year as a freshman. He really studied hard under our quarterback last year, who was a really good football player. And, I think the most satisfying thing seeing where he ended up at this season was that he didn't try to become him. He wasn't trying to copy the guy before him. He was trying to learn the lessons he could from him, but at the same point, he understood who he is and how different he is as a quarterback. He's a lot more of that pocket passer, where our previous one was a lot more of a scrambler. So, that's where I was really proud of him, is he didn't try to be somebody he wasn't. He knew there was a lot of pressure on him to come in and perform, just to continue to keep us at the top. And, he really did a great job just, trusting and owning his own personality at that position and continuing to grow all the way through the season.
So I know you point to a lot of this year being about mindset and cohesion, and I want to dig into that with you. But I do want to review some of the things we've talked about before and understand their place in this season as well. And we've talked about your offense and the way you guys use your formations as one, and the other aspect is analytics. So let's start with the analytics side. I know you're a big believer of it. You've been on this podcast before and have talked about that, even offered some resources for us here, and I'll link back to that in our show notes, which now, of course, is the new home at coachingcoordinator.com for our listeners. But talk to us about analytics, and I guess I find that guys who are into analytics, this still keeps progressing more and more, and there's a lot of opportunity in it as well.
Yeah, our analytics just continue to get better and better, especially as we get more and more data. But this year with a new quarterback, a new offensive line, we do kind of hit the reset button a little bit just because we had so many new pieces in that offense. But, the big way we used it this year was, we really tried to identify the hot hand, find out who was making the most, in terms of gaining or building momentum, who was making the most of their touches. And then, I think in a lot of our games, you saw the second half really just ride whoever that hot hand was and, try to find them some different ways to get them the football. And, defensively same type of thing. I mean, we tried to identify who they were trying to go to with, or, who they thought was their hot hand, and then just try to devote as many resources as we could to get them out of their game plan.
So when you look at that aspect of it and looking at who the hot hand is, it seems like something that's pretty easy to figure out. But from looking at the data, looking at the numbers, what kind of things do you like to look at, and what things maybe start to pop for you that validate, like, okay, this is the guy we need to get more touches to?
The two big ones that we've used traditionally, I guess, and especially this year, were just our OVOA ratings, that's what we use as our momentum tracker. It's a fantasy football metric that's used a lot in that win percentage, where obviously bigger plays would have a higher percent on that win, or a higher impact on that win percentage. So we use that, to kind of identify who's going to have that breakout game. And then we use simple success, for the consistency. So, because obviously you could have someone who's, high risk, high reward, could really get that big play, but, maybe they're not it's a big play or an incomplete pass or a big play or a no gain. Whereas, that consistency thing is just, are you going to be able to stay on schedule? So, if you got into a 4-minute situation, you just want to stay on schedule as much as you can. You might lean towards the success factor rate as opposed to the OVOA momentum one. So those are really our main two. And, like I said, I think as the year went along and we got more and more data specifically to this group and this team, I think we really trusted those numbers more and more as the year went along.
Coach, I think some people get a little bit overwhelmed in how to come up with this data and what you need to do it, but you have a simple process for that. Can you just explain to our listeners exactly the work that you guys put into it, and I guess probably more than anything, the time it takes? That it really isn't something that infringes greatly on the time you guys spend on this, and the time you got to spend with your family and all the other things as well.
Yeah, our in-game ones is really the main ones that we've used. I mean, we still use some for game planning purposes and stuff, but our in-game ones are pretty simple. We've just got our booth coaches that are recording this and crunching the numbers really quickly. I mean, our play success is pretty similar to most, getting 40% of the yards on first down, half the yards you need on second down, and then converting into a first down, for on third or fourth down would be, was it a successful play or was it not? It's pretty much a yes or a no situation, and you can just get your simple percentages. This guy's, our running back is, 50%, he's every 1 out of 2 he's success, or he's 80%. So, I mean, that's our simple play success one. That's the one we used, again, when you're thinking of staying on schedule. You're not trying to necessarily manufacture a big play. You just want to make sure that you're having successful plays all the way down the field. And then our OVOA takes that, but then we're actually going to account and give every single play a point value. So a successful play, the base point value would just be 1. And then if it's not a successful play, it'd be a 0. You can actually get negative points for losing yardage or throwing an interception or a fumble or whatnot. And then you actually would get bonus points for having an explosive play or a touchdown. So, you could get up to an 8-point play if you had a touchdown that was more than 40 yards, or you could have a negative 6-point play if you threw a pick. So, that one was a little bit more of, when we need the big play, when we're looking to hit a home run or to flip some momentum, who's our guy that's going to build us the most momentum or that have the highest probability of building us a lot of momentum in a short-term amount of plays.
So looking at the guys and digging a little bit into the offense this year, we mentioned already some key pieces that you were replacing. What was your approach to, having these new guys involved in missing some of those key players from the previous state championship in order to keep that offense rolling?
Again, I think a lot of it goes to, just like I talked about, our quarterback was realizing that this is a new team. And last year in 2019, we had an exceptional team, an exceptional offense. We broke the state record for points and yards gained in a season, for South Dakota. And this year we were not that. I mean, we were a lot more of a methodical ball control style offense, whereas, again, 2019, we were able to stretch the field in every possible way and really try to take as many shots as we could. So, I mean, that was a mindset switch for our kids, for our coaches, and just being okay with those 10, 12 play drives, and again, trying to focus on staying on schedule as opposed to just trying to look for that next big play, So it was definitely a challenge for I think everybody just initially those first couple games because you were so used to everything from the year before. But once everyone was really able to just embrace, what we were and learn what this team is the best at and then really get on board with it, I think you really saw it start to take off.
So I'm sure there's always that little bit of pressure of what has been done before. So 3 state championships in a row, 18-game winning streak, but in a year that's full of adversity with everything that you have to face with the pandemic, which you guys did have some situations with COVID. You guys did lose 2 games as well. So you mentioned, the mindset and the cohesion as important parts of that. Talk us through what were some of those things you needed to do to keep the focus of this team and keep everybody on track, and I guess not lose your minds when, holy cow, not only do we not have an 18-game winning streak, we've lost 2 games.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first and foremost, the biggest thing this year, the mindset for us was, you have to have that new appreciation for the fact that we get to play football. So many teams around the country didn't get the opportunity or hasn't gotten the opportunity yet to play this football season that, we just had to be thankful for it. And it was one thing to say that, but it was another thing when week 4 we lost, we weren't able to play our game because we had, out of our about 65 player roster, we had 40 kids that were unable to play due to COVID, either being a close contact or testing positive. And, that was a very big blow to a lot of our kids. And then we ended up playing that following week, but we ended up playing down about half our roster, and I just think that brought a whole new level of meaning and level of thankfulness to every single player on our team and our coaches too. Just the fact that we get to, every game we do get to go out there and play and perform, we can't take that for granted, because again, it could be gone at a moment's notice. And, it's one of those things where until it is gone at a moment's notice, you don't really think about it that way, because you're always saying, oh, it might happen, but it's not going to happen to us. And so I think when it did happen to us, that really helped our mindset just to adjust and be thankful, because that was right after a loss, our first loss that ended our winning streak. So, and then, obviously with those losses, I mean, I think that, quite frankly, I really think losing 2 games won us the state championship, because it released so much pressure from our guys. Our guys tried so hard to live up to the previous year and continue on this tradition of, we were not supposed to lose games. That I just think that once we lost one, everyone was able to be like, okay, now that's over. Now we can focus on us. We don't need to worry about the past. Now let's just be the best team we can be. And, you really saw our guys start to come together. There wasn't a lot of panic like you would see with some programs, I think. And our guys just continued to go back to work and trust each other and keep building to be the best team that this year's team could be.
Well, I think there's an important lesson in that right there, and in seeing that, some of that maybe, as you said, those 2 losses helped you to a state championship. So looking at that now, what's your takeaway, and what do you think you might do differently as a coach when you're faced with that situation again, or what advice do you have to coaches who, have that, especially that young team who's trying to live up to the past, to tradition, whatever you might call it, in that? And I think the key switch was we can be ourselves now, right? So somehow they weren't being themselves. What did you learn from that?
I think the biggest thing that our coaching staff preached all season was just that we had to stay the process. We've got to trust, that we're trying to do what we need to do to get where we need to be at the end of the season come playoff time, which is, obviously the most important time. I mean, if we can afford to lose a game or 2 in the regular season, we'll still get in the playoffs. And then if we're playing our best football, we can make a run in the playoffs, which is what everyone wants. And, I just think it's so tempting at times to kind of feel that need for perfection, which is great. I mean, everyone needs to want to be perfect and wants to strive for excellence. But realistically, we've just got to realize that, hey, it's okay to lose a game here and there, especially if we're continuing to grow while we're losing that game. You don't want a bad loss, but if you're taking lessons away from it so that you don't lose again, then, some of those things can be great refocusers. And I think our coaching staff, did a really good job with the kids of not letting them get down after the losses and just, finding the positives in it and say, hey guys, here's right here how we can come back and win this game the next time we get this situation. And, I think, especially looking at our 3 playoff games, I mean, the ability to win close games came from finding a way to win a couple of them in the season, and then, finding out, well, we didn't win these 2 games, and here's the plays that we didn't make that we really needed to switch in our favor.
So now, Coach, maybe there's that little bit of pressure that's on you guys to continue what you're doing. You guys did do something historic in your division, the first team to win 4 in a row, only the 3rd team in state history to win more than 3 in a row. So a lot there that certainly your kids can hang their hat on, but probably, you do have some players coming back. What's the approach now as you move forward to, I know it's not been long, but I'm sure you're already thinking about what are we going to do in 2021? How do we need to do it with this new team?
I think the biggest thing is just kind of like we approach this year. I mean, we always strive to say that, hey, this is a new team. this isn't the 2020 team that won or the 2019 team that won. This will be the 21 team, and we've got to continue to learn and figure out what this team is and what this team is good at, what we need to work on, and kind of block out all the rest. There's no point in looking ahead. There's no point in looking behind. We just got to keep our eyes set in the present and keep working for the team that we're going to have next year. So, I think that this year, again, once we got through that first loss, especially, I think that's where you really saw this team settle in and focus up. And, hopefully we can use that as a lesson too, that, guys, we can't afford to look back and to dwell on successes of the past. We've got to continue to focus on ourselves right now, on this team and the players that we have that are playing for us tonight, and just continually build year in and year out, and not just continue to focus on what's going to be going on in the past, what's going on in the future. I just think staying present and staying positive are two of the most important things that we can do.
So as a staff, we're heading into that time now. It's getting to be clinic season, which clinic season has really opened up across the country, where, if you want to go to the clinic, for example, of the Illinois high school coaches, which is coming up, or you go to the Lone Star Clinic, which always been a great one, virtually everything's available to you now. And, there's all these kinds of opportunities to learn. What are you and your staff excited to learn about or develop on it as you approach this new clinic season?
I think the one thing we've always done, and I think we've done a pretty good job of it in the past, was we always try to go out and find somebody that does something very similar to us and really dive into what they do. We always trade some different film with a couple schools around the country, some that might run something very similar to us. But then we also, on the opposite hand, try to find someone that does something that's almost the exact polar opposite of us. And I'd actually learned that at the AFCA under 30 from David Shaw was presenting and was talking about how he and Chip Kelly would always sit down and talk together because, they always could learn something from one another, and you never know what you could find that would work in either one's system. And, that was something that really surprised me because, again, offensively they're about as different as you can be. And, they still talked about all the different things that they actually had taken from one another. So that's kind of the philosophy we've gotten, or that we've taken on here, is that, while we do want to go find some schools that run some similar stuff, swap some film and, kind of play back and forth some questions with, we also wanted to get some schools that, do absolutely nothing similar on film that we do. Obviously we're a no huddle spread, throw it around and, get to the edge team running the ball. We want to find some of those traditional wing T teams or those flex teams that we can kind of look and see. Maybe it's a blocking scheme, maybe it's, a communication thing or a line call or something, but, there's almost always something you can find to use from a different team, whether it's a different system or the same system.
Yeah, I had written an article just a little while back after watching a clinic with Sonny Dykes, and what you said there kind of reminds me of something he was talking about. I mean, you're air raid, you're thinking about spreading it around, spread formations, etc. And, I've seen this as a trend, and he talked about it here as some of the advantages of adding tight ends and fullbacks into your system. Is that something you guys have thought about as a possibility here moving forward? Because, I think you'd agree everybody's kind of been building now to stop the spread and using nickel personnel as their base personnel, or even some teams using dime as their base personnel. But any thoughts to that trend?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've actually done a little bit of that. I mean, even though we've kind of been that spread team, we've always had a tight end every year. And, this year and actually a little bit of last year, we actually were a lot of two tight ends, where we still were able to go spread empty, but with double tight. And, that was, I think last year in particular, 2019, that really helped our run game because our quarterback was such a run threat where we could add those gaps and still have 5 receivers, and we could actually put 3 receivers on one side and make it a quad set. So, we were able to have a lot of different fun formations utilizing the tight end. So, I mean, I think it's definitely a fun concept to continue to build towards, and I think you are going to start seeing more and more of that as we go, just kind of the meshing of all these different philosophies coming together. And, again, especially if teams have a mobile quarterback, then, adding those tight ends or fullbacks into that kind of that that air raid style offense where they're still in a position to receive and run a lot of those quick concepts, but at the same point add gaps for the run game. I think that would be a really cool thing that you'll keep seeing.
So, Steve, as we wrap up here and look back at this past season, you did talk about a lot of the things that helped bring you guys to success. But what was the one thing from this past year that would be what helped you guys find the winning edge and win that 4th state championship in a row?
It always sounds cliche to say stuff like this, but this team was the epitome of a team. They cared for each other, they played for each other, they loved each other, and they blotted out a lot of noise. Obviously from the pandemic, but this was also a team that when we had penalties, there wasn't a lot of finger pointing. When there was a blown coverage, there wasn't a lot of finger pointing. It was just a lot of guys that were like, hey, yeah, we messed up that play. That's okay. We're going to go get the next one. And, that positive mindset of, we understand that there's going to be things that don't go our way. We understand there's going to be calls that we don't agree with. And, we're not going to make every single play, but that's okay because we're going to go make the next one. And, our whole team embraced that and just the way that they would pick each other up out in the field. Our state championship game, we actually had an offensive lineman get 4 holding penalties. And, not once did he sulk his head down. Not once did our other guys point a finger at him. It was all encouragement. And, we obviously fought through that and ended up winning the game pretty handily. So, it's just a really cool thing to see the kids continue to encourage each other and stay positive, especially when you have a lot of those moments that could break a lot of teams or a lot of kids. So, I definitely think that mindset, the positive mindset, the family mindset is what definitely brought us all the way back up to the top again this year.
Coach, for our listeners out there who want to connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
You can, on Twitter, at Steele_house. That's my last name, STEELE _house. And then, my email is steve.steele@k12.sd.us. And I said, I'm especially getting into the off season here. We're always looking for teams to swap film with or, exchange ideas with. So, more than happy to reach out and talk to anyone about any football stuff. There's never a bad time to talk football.
Coach, I really appreciate you taking the time. It was great catching up with you here, and good luck to you and the Govs in 2021.
All right. Thanks for having me on, Keith.
Thank you again for listening to the Coaching Coordinator Podcast. Please, if you are enjoying the podcast, head over to iTunes or Spotify and click 5-star for a rate. If you have a minute, write a review. It really helps the podcast. Check out our new home for the Coaching Coordinator Podcast. That's at coachandcoordinator.com. And follow me on Twitter at Coach K. Grabowski.